China, I think, is fairly clear in what its principal concerns are with Afghanistan, which is that they do not want the country to be a place where Uyghur militants or dissidents can gather and launch attacks or cause trouble for China. The secondary concern is that instability in Afghanistan does not get too out of hand to the point that it might start impacting Central Asia and Pakistan, places where China is quite heavily invested. So their real concern is about sort of broader stability and direct threats that might come back to them. And they can see that the Taliban are going to be in some position of power within, however the sort of cards shake out over the next few months. And they recognize a need to have a relationship and to be able to talk directly to them about their concerns.
Will they economically invest heavily in Afghanistan and in some ways have a stake in how the political situation plays out there?
I mean, I often think that the kind of economic side of the discussion with Afghanistan and China is hugely overplayed. The Chinese could and theoretically would have a great interest in investing heavily in Afghanistan, this country which has lots of natural resources. They've got a booming economy. They need those natural resources. But at the same time, that's been true for a long time now. And we've seen Chinese companies come in and do big projects. But what's ended up happening in a lot of those cases, well, in the two major cases, a project up in the north, an oil project, and a big copper mine just below Kabul, is the companies have won the projects and they're not done a huge amount with them. And that has been the broader narrative. In terms of infrastructure, we've seen some Chinese companies go in there, but they've tended to go in and deliver projects on behalf of international financial institutions. We've seen very little direct Chinese investment going into Afghanistan, and the economic links are actually fairly limited.
So what's in it for the Taliban?
Well, I think for the Taliban, in much the same way as all of the actors in Afghanistan, for all of them, no matter what happens, at the end of the day, China will be a neighbor, and China is the world's second largest economy. And China is an incredibly influential player, increasingly in their entire neighborhood. So this is a power that they have to have a relationship with. And there is always that potential economic opportunity that might be on the horizon. And the idea of continuing to try to entice that is going to appeal to whoever's in power in Kabul, be that the Taliban, be that the government of Afghanistan that is in power now. So the need to have a relationship with China is always going to be there, whoever's there. The other side to this for the Taliban specifically is that this gives them even more credibility on the world stage. They now are talking directly to the Americans. They're now talking publicly and directly to the Chinese. They're talking directly publicly to the Russians. They are essentially being recognized as a de facto political force in Afghanistan, and that gives them incredible cachet.
What sort of right and capacity do they have, though, to give China assurances over any Islamic terrorism?
I mean, I think that, if they control parts of the country, then putatively they could say, we will guarantee that in the territory we control, we will not let militants launch attacks against you. They've made these promises in the past, and it's not clear that they were ever really followed through on. Pre-September 11, there were Uyghur groups in Afghanistan, some of whom were plotting things against China, even though the Chinese government had reached out to the authorities, the Taliban at the time, to tell them, we need you to make sure this doesn't happen. So, this has been a consistent issue. The Taliban will offer these assurances. But I think the key thing from Beijing's perspective that we should remember is this isn't the only avenue for Beijing. China has relations with the government. They have relationships with the various warlord factions on the ground and strongmen who sort of control parts of northern Afghanistan. And they've also developed a stronger military presence and strengthened the military capability of Tajikistan, of Pakistan, and even helped establish a direct base in Afghanistan. So they've kind of insulated themselves physically from threats coming back. And they've also built connections with all the various factions on the ground. So in a way, what China's done is it's hedged. They've created this web of contacts and web of connections, which ultimately means that they can take assurances from everybody, and in aggregate, this should give them enough assurance.
The China's been critical of the US's role in Afghanistan over the last couple of years, and particularly with the sort of potentially the security position it's leaving behind. Is China looking to fill that vacuum, do you think, or is it more driven by national security issues?
One of the consistent things I've heard from talking to Chinese experts looking at Afghanistan over the years is that they call it the graveyard of empires. And I think this is a message which resonates, frankly, in Beijing. They've watched as, the Russians went in, and then they were working with the Americans to cause trouble for them. They've watched as the Americans have now gone in and now left 20 years later with the situation still relatively unstable. I don't see any incentive, frankly, for Beijing, unfortunately, to step in and fill this kind of vacuum. Having said that, I think what we should also remember is that what Beijing thinks is an acceptable final situation in Afghanistan is probably different to what is considered in Western capitals. We would want to see a stable country, maybe, that has equal rights for all, where you have a sort of country that is on its way to being some sort of liberal democracy, in its entirety, not just sort of in the capital city. I don't think Beijing is particularly worried about that. What they want is essentially stability, something that's not causing them any problems, and that isn't a place where other people can create national security problems for them. And frankly, who's running that, how human rights, how people's rights are being sort of observed within that context, they would say is up to the local authorities to determine, whoever those local authorities are.
Great to talk, Raffaello. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.